Unless you've been living under a rock for the last number of weeks or even days, you will know that Apple have made a major update to iOS 14, specifically in the area of privacy. Now, their app tracking transparency policy in particular is what we're going to take a look at, because this will impact digital marketers in a negative way, or at least it could. So what we're going to do in this video is break down this update from Apple to understand what the impact will be on the two biggest advertising platforms out there, which are Google Ads and Facebook Ads, and really get to grips and understand what the impact of this change from Apple will be. Hey guys, Darren Taylor of thebigmarketer.com, and my job is to make you a digital marketing expert. Now, if you're new to the channel, I'm a trainer and consultant specializing in digital marketing, so tips and tutorials and news updates like this one. If that sounds of interest to you, you should consider subscribing to the channel. And in this video, we're taking a look at iOS 14 and the privacy update that's been incoming for a while, and get to grips and understand what the impact is going to be on Facebook ads and Google ads. The first thing to mention is that iPhone users have always been able to opt out of sharing data with apps. In fact, there are ways you can do this in the menus of an Apple device, but the big change coming is now that Apple are going to explicitly ask for users' permission to share data with apps explicitly, and users will be given a pop-up prompt that will be asking them for that permission. Now, if you're like me and you see somebody's asking for your personal data, you're usually going to click on no. And that's what's going to be happening with a lot of app users. They're going to be clicking on no, I don't want to share my data with any of your apps. And that's going to happen. So what can we do about it as marketers, and how is it going to impact the two major platforms? Well, let's start off with exploring Google Ads and how this could potentially negatively impact Google Ads. First of all, it's really important to understand that this update affects apps. So when you think of Google Ads, you think of going to Google and performing searches and then people clicking on adverts in the search results. This side of Google Ads isn't necessarily going to be impacted that heavily, because of course, using search in terms of going to Google's website and performing searches, if your customers are still doing this, then you're not necessarily going to be negatively impacted by this update. The main thing that's going to be impacted are people using apps. Now, when we think of apps, what are the apps that Google has installed on iPhones? Of course, there's obviously Google Chrome people can use. There is obviously YouTube, which is a major app that's installed on iPhones. In fact, pretty much every iOS user will probably watch YouTube at some point in time. And of course, there are maps as well. Now, of course, Apple have their own version of maps, and they have their own browser as well. But YouTube is really the biggest area that Google could be affected by. So what's the effect? Well, of course, if somebody is saying to YouTube, when they open the YouTube app and they're asked if they want to share their data with YouTube and they click no, what is the impact? Well, of course, what it means is YouTube are going to find it harder to better target adverts, meaning the quality of targeting available to YouTube to target users specifically based on their past behaviors is going to be more difficult. So expect a lot more difficult time with YouTube retargeting, but specifically in the area of cross-device targeting as well, because some of the more advanced data points that YouTube gets from its users, particularly those of course using iOS devices, they are going to get less data, meaning the matching of cross-device attribution across YouTube is going to be more difficult, and that applies to maps as well. So any proprietary technology that delivers adverts for Google that is installed as an app on iOS is going to be negatively impacted. But Google haven't given up all hope. In fact, they're fighting back because they're making some changes themselves. Now, this might sound complicated, but the technology used for iOS device users and app builders to access users' data is called IDFA. Now, Google, of course, use this with all of their apps to get users' data to better target their advertising and suggestions. Now, this technology is specifically the type of technology that Apple will prompt users to share data with. So anyone using IDFA in terms of getting users' data in order to share data with apps will need to see the prompt. So those users will see the prompt. So Google has seen that this is the case, and they're going to use a different alternative tracking technology in iOS in order to continue to get users' data, but without generating the prompt. So what Google are going to do is move to a different type of tracking technology called SKAdNetwork, and this technology doesn't generate the prompt for users to apply and accept privacy and data sharing. So that becomes something of a workaround for Google. But of course, it's not as easy as that. Google are going to struggle because this technology isn't as strong as their main tracking technology. So Google are going to lose a lot of data points, and it means that cross-device attribution becomes more difficult. Understanding users' behavior becomes more difficult as well. So Google are working with Apple to try and improve this tracking technology. Of course, it's all down to Apple, and I can't imagine Apple trying to help one of their biggest tech rivals very much. So I think we're going to lose a bit of quality of tracking across YouTube adverts and things like that. And of course, if you have app analytics in terms of Firebase installed and you're marketing an app, then you're also going to suffer from this same consequence as well of lower quality data as Google shifts from one tracking technology to another. They either have to bite the bullet and switch the technology or accept they'll get no data whatsoever on users if they all opt out of sharing, which they will. So that covers Google Ads. It's not going to necessarily impact the majority of search campaigns, but if you're marketing apps or you're using YouTube as a platform or even Google Maps as a platform for your ad delivery, then there's going to be issues in the future. You're going to get less quality data, but in reality, not a huge amount is going to change for you specifically. Google are working around this. They'll find a way, and ultimately, even if the data is not as good, the kind of top level technology of targeting campaigns will remain good enough for advertisers. Facebook ads, on the other hand, is a different story, and as you can imagine, Facebook ads is going to be massively impacted by this change because, of course, the vast majority of users on Facebook are using the mobile app. And in fact, if you categorize all mobile app users, the majority of people will be using an iOS iPhone device. So this becomes a huge problem for Facebook because if every single person using Facebook gets a discouraging prompt telling them that they're going to share data with Facebook, do you want to do this, yes or no? In today's current climate, you can't blame people for clicking no. People are going to lean towards clicking no. We're marketers, we're selfish. We want people to click yes, but people are going to click no. So what does this mean? It means the Facebook pixel cannot gather the data it should against their user's profile. So that data sharing between the pixel and the user's behavior no longer happens. There's going to be a massive disconnect in terms of the quality of adverts people are going to see because people aren't going to be sharing their data with Facebook. That becomes a huge problem. Facebook have already come out and said that conversion tracking events and also ad personalization are going to be negatively impacted by this as well. So they've explicitly said this. So we can expect to see that decline coming to campaigns where iOS users are using Facebook. Now, Facebook have some workarounds, of course, the way people behave on Facebook itself. Facebook can understand a lot of data points about the user's behavior on the platform itself, but sharing the data between the app and the user has been blocked if they click on no when the prompt comes up. So their data points are going to be a lot weaker, and it's going to be a big issue for Facebook ads users. And I haven't even got onto people advertising their app on Facebook as well. There's going to be a massively negative impact for them as well, because if you're paying for downloads of an app and your app itself will have a prompt and Facebook ads has a prompt, then you're definitely not going to get the data needed to build a successful ad campaign for your app either. Facebook have released an SDK specifically for this iOS 14 update, and all people advertising and building apps on Facebook will need to upgrade to this SDK. Now, if you don't do this, there's going to be massive impacts on you. You won't get any kind of data sharing if people click no. By upgrading, you do get enhanced options and more visibility in terms of data sharing, but it's still not going to be as good as it was before. Ultimately, if people don't want to share data with you, you're not going to get the data you want. Now, I'm a strong believer in knowing the extent of one's ignorance, and I'm not an app developer. I can't speak on this as much as an app developer could and go into the specifics around this. All I'm speaking around is the marketing side of things and promotion sides of things. So if you want to find out more about the app side of things and technology tracking, then you might have to watch a different video. But in terms of what Facebook is also doing to accommodate this issue with iOS users, is they're looking at aggregating conversion data. Facebook's aggregated event measurement protocol means that all advertisers will be limited to 8 conversion events per domain. So by limiting it down, Facebook have a little bit more room to play with understanding how people behave on a website and matching that behavior with users on Facebook. So this allows them a little bit more wiggle room, and it means that larger websites with loads of conversion points will be limited. So you'll have to choose your conversions specifically by going into your business manager and updating your settings in there and choosing the 8 conversions that are most key to your business. If you don't do anything, Facebook will look at your events and choose the most relevant for your business to use as conversions. So there are some workarounds and some ways Facebook can continue to operate with a successful ad platform, which it is a successful ad platform. So please don't be discouraged from advertising on Facebook. You will still get results. But ultimately, there are going to be some restrictions in the data, and this is really going to show in your campaigns. Now, I haven't seen any data yet from campaign performance, and in fact, the biggest Facebook ads campaigns I'm looking at right now haven't seen any dips in performance just yet. But of course, this is rolling out, and it's still something that's very much in the works and happening right now. So the impact won't be seen for a long time to come, and in terms of a comparative look back window, we haven't got to that point yet, but we will, and it will be interesting to see how this performance of this new iOS update affects Facebook advertisers. But as you can imagine, with Facebook being so negatively impacted by this, they are not going down without a fight, and it appears that Facebook are going to be trying to take Apple to court over antitrust, because what Facebook are arguing is that having that prompt that discourages users from sharing data only applies to third-party apps and apps that are installed on iOS devices, but not Apple's own apps. Apple's own apps don't actually ask this. So if you go into iTunes, if you go into the Safari browser, all of those types of apps that are native to iOS, Apple don't ask for any prompt at all. So there is an argument to be made there that Facebook have that's valid, and that is you're treating us differently to yourselves. Now, we know Google have had antitrust issues in the past, so we know that potentially Facebook could be successful with a legal challenge. Now, it's not been confirmed that this is happening yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did happen and Facebook were also successful. So it would go one of two ways. Either Apple also do the same for their own apps, or alternatively, they stop this prompt altogether. It will be interesting to see which way it goes, but I wouldn't be surprised if Facebook are successful if they did launch a legal challenge. So there you have it. There is a breakdown of what the impact is going to be of this iOS 14 update on Facebook ads and Google ads. So Facebook advertisers are going to have a bit of a worry at the moment. There's going to be some confusion. There might be a lot less data, hence the legal challenge from Facebook. Whereas Google advertisers are going to see a small issue with some data restriction, particularly when it comes to YouTube and when it comes to retargeting. But generally speaking, it's not going to be as big of an impact as Facebook ads advertisers. So let's see what happens in the future. This is still rolling out. This is still something that's very much in the now. So let me know in the comments if you think you've been impacted by this, or if you're worried about this change from Apple. More important than that, don't forget to subscribe, check out the other content across my channel, and I'll see you guys on my next video.